Now, for the first time ever, MCA Universal Home Video presents 3 collector's sets, each featuring 3 classic monster films and priced at just $44.98.
I'm greatly relieved.
The Universal Studios Monsters box set includes Frankenstein.
Think of it. The brain of a dead man, waiting to live again in a body I made.
Dracula.
I told him nothing. I'm loyal to you, Master.
The Wolfman.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
The Mummies box set includes The Mummy.
Bury it where you found it. You have read the curse. You dare defy it.
The Mummy's Curse.
We must find Dr. Halsey. The mummy took the girl away.
The Mummy's Ghost.
If you spot the mummy, don't try to mix with them. Just keep them in sight until more help arrives.
The Creature box set includes Creature from the Black Lagoon. The Creature Walks Among Us. Revenge of the Creature.
Kill me. Prehistoric monster. Maybe there's no such thing.
Look for these collector's box sets priced at just $44.98 each. From MCA Universal Home Video.
Are you afraid of unknown things?
Good evening. And I'm your host, Sully, and with me, as always, JJ and Tom have joined back on for this topic.
Blah, blah, very scary. Ooh.
Oh!
Ow!
As always, Paul is always in the corner, trying to not get stalked by werewolves.
Werewolves, ninjas, whatever else comes at me. Just gotta watch out for it.
That's what they missed out the boat on, was a ninja monster.
That's right.
That would have been pretty interesting.
It would have been cool. Joining us
Ninja werewolf.
Ninja werewolf. Make it so. Joining us for the show is Amanda Wilson.
Hello. Hi. Looking forward to being hopefully the final girl this evening, and I happy to be here to talk all things Universal Monsters.
Okay, very nice.
Amanda. Welcome to the show.
Welcome. It's actually really fun kind of just looking at this, because there's some sites that vary on whether they want to include the 1920s version of the Lou Chaney Sr. in Hunchback of Notre Dame or the Phantom of the Opera, which kind of kickstarted it off. And then recently others have started noting, hey, this Island Earth is technically one of the Universal monsters.
I think it does start off with Chaney.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doing those 2 movies, especially The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
If anything, it was the blueprint. And then
it's the blueprint.
Took off in the 30s with, both Dracula's, the Frankenstein, and the 1932 Mummy.
And the thing is that he was supposed to play Dracula. And
I've heard that, but
he was doing
goes into detail on it.
He was doing a movie where he played an engineer on a train, and the stuff they were blowing around for snow was like fiberglass, and
that was about right for the time.
Yeah, they were doing that, and it got caught in his throat, and he developed throat cancer. Yeah, so Emily wanted him to play Dracula. When he did London After Midnight, which is the lost MGM movie that if you've ever read about it, it's known as one of the great lost movies of all time.
This is back before they were backing everything up on tape and everything.
Yeah. Well, basically, it was shown once, and then, like they said, the film was basically destroyed. It was, the negative was destroyed. The only thing they have is like pictures and stuff like that. And Chaney looks weird because he's got like a fright wig on and like a top hat. And he's got, his eyes are sunk in. And he's got like these really like, cheesy vampire teeth. And he walks around like he's like in a very stooped over manner as the vampire. And they remade that movie as Mark of the Vampire in 1935 with Lugosi and Lionel Barrymore.
It's an interesting experiment. Yeah.
But yeah, the first two Chaney movies, the Hunchback of Notre Dame and Phantom of the Opera, are the blueprint, the tableau, if you will, for what monster movies were going to be.
Totally. And because of all the DV sets varying back in the day, or let alone the tapes, it's easy to forget that, the Invisible Man is part of that canon, even the Mole People, Deadly Man is.
Yes. Yeah. But
would you say Dracula or Frankenstein or the Wolfman is your personal favorite, JJ?
My personal favorite, I think, has to be Dracula, because it's such an iconic role
factor.
It's an iconic role for Lugosi, and that's actually the first like real movie I saw with my parents.
Oh wow!
When a little kid. Well, Channel 13. If anybody out is from the East Coast, Channel 13 would always show horror movies in October. Late at night. So I got to see
some of them still do, fortunately.
Yeah. And I got to see the big three. I got to see I got to see Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, and The Mummy. So they played those four. And then they like
the MVPs.
Yeah. So it was great to watch it. And then they do like The Bride of Frankenstein and but Dracula was the one that I loved because of the fact that he's so suave and so debonair. And unlike Draculas that would come later, like Christopher Lee or Franklin Jelly, he's got that, like, it's just this weird way he moves about. His character is, you don't see fangs, you don't see anything. You just it's his presence.
Lugosi was able to get through his limitations and actually just kind of, aside from the look, again, it goes back to the Cagney routine. He has the walk, he has the beats, he has just the glancing around, just the intimidation factor that is needed for this role, which is kind of why he's just always going to be listed as the top vampire portrayers.
Yeah.
Okay, so usually I'd let the newbies go. So Amanda, how did you get into the Universal Monster Circle and just say, this is worthy of my time? I see why these are considered gems, why these have become even more beloved off of cable TV and home media releases.
Yeah, it's so funny because you're asking that and I'm trying to think of a clever answer, and it's just like, I just
want the sincere, like, hey, I was one with this. Like, we've had all kinds of answers before, just when having random chats, ironically, is like, I know many who even go to the Abbott and Costello crossover. That was their introduction.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think a lot. I was thinking a lot as I watched these, of being such a huge fan of Haunted Honeymoon as a child.
And this was before we were going to kind of even the Evil Dead or Scream kind of marketing. This is like word of mouth, and this is a midnight movie, or it's both. You're going to both be creeped out and be laughing your ass off. And
it's just
use
like
our imagination.
Yeah, I just feel like they've all, just been, I've always liked older movies, like even as a kid, even as an unruly kid, I always liked older movies. And they just kind of, I just sort of maybe knew about them as a kid and then fell in love with them in high school as a pretentious wannabe film student, aspiring person. And
say no such thing. There's no one more pretentious than my shithead professor. Just saying. Anyway,
hitting the art house theaters and getting to see some of these on the big screen for the first time. Like, I remember being in Boston the summer before my senior year of high school and seeing The Mummy on the big screen for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
It's just really a life-changing experience, to see these, I've been fortunate enough. We have an amazing classic film festival here we're summer movie series here in Columbus, Ohio, every summer at a classic theater downtown. And, I've gotten to see so many of these on the big screen.
And be with the right crowd. You don't have the current annoying crowds, which is, people bringing their, underage kid into it and they're screaming, asking to be let go or dicking around on their phone.
And people are excited to be there. And it's just visually, there's so many different things we can talk about in the course of this conversation. But I think the first thing that comes to me is just visually, they're stunning. There's so many shots that are so big and I'm really not an expert by any means, but really interested in practical effects and
you're awesome.
classic effects and just the way that they were able to use the sets and the effects they had to create a feeling that was so big is giant. Just really amazing to me and something that has lasted because it's just, correct me if I'm wrong, because you all probably know a lot more of the modern stuff than I do, but I don't feel like we see those big, I don't know, it'd almost be difficult to put on something so big now without the.
We talk about this all the time. Like we were talking James Cameron on here and noting how after 91, every other producer wanted to make their movie kind of look as epic as T2, but they forgot what made it good. They're just just enhance the effects. I'm like, yeah, but did you focus on anything else? No.
Right.
So
exactly.
That's why this looks great, but sucks.
it's not only that, but Amanda's right because and the way the scenery was done back then, everything looked epic.
Yeah, there's Technicolor, and in this case, pre-Technicolor is the music and the set design is kind of the main draw. And okay, so my introduction to it personally, I just recall my parents just seeing casual movies like The Wizard of Oz and everything on TV, and one that constantly replayed was the original Frankenstein. Even if I never saw it all the way through, it stuck with me. It's wow, this can be kind of deep and emotional. Just seeing a man just realizing he's a creation. But the best known, ironically, I think Lugosi is probably the most interesting of this bunch. The one I am probably the most familiar with is easily Lou Chaney Jr. just because, again, just so many mainstream, Western appearances, especially High Noon, but then seeing, Spider Baby, House of Terror, The Alligator People, Indian Fighter. It's the dude knew how to bring so much life, whatever the role, whether he was just basically a featured extra or grind or just, someone's dad, who happened to be an outlaw. You just could tell that I applaud him the most for just getting through all those typecasts that were even harsher back in that day. I actually did not really realize until doing additional research in recent years that there was more than 2 Frankenstein movies. I just never saw those other ones as much other than the crossover with the Wolfman.
Yeah, there was so much to think about. I was like, what do I watch? Because I loved having the excuse to rewatch some of my favorites, before this conversation. And then I was going to good old Wikipedia to see what my parameters were and what I wanted to focus. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Even
there was really a lot of sequels and spin-offs that I didn't see.
The Christopher Lee 1959 Mummy, I often see still just replayed often more than this one. And that's a Hammer horror production,
Yeah, which is a soft spot also in my heart, but a tale for another time.
Totally. It's a totally different oyster. It's hard to even compare it. Okay, so Paul, when did you decide to venture into this? Where just the tombs, the catacombs, if you will?
Well, as far as film goes, my introduction was actually the Abbott and Costello movies.
Oh wow!
I was
there you go.
I was loosely familiar with them beforehand, just as
it's just people forget that they were both on the Universal lot, and they just said, "Hey, we got the rights to all these when we split the bill."
That was pretty much my first official foray into it, but I definitely liked it, and when I came across more, I tried to watch them whenever I could. Ones that stuck out most for me were I really loved the Dracula movies. My mom had a hand in that too because
this was years before we were trying to make them sensual or even just very gruesome.
Probably most of the Dracula movies I watched as a kid were probably the ones from the 60s and 70s.
Gotcha.
But just catching those on whatever network TV was running, usually on a Saturday and such. But definitely the old black and white ones. I don't know what it is, but just those type of movies, the black and white, just really pops, sticks in your head there really good.
Yeah, it's like you almost want to be teleported to that actual time.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tom, I better ask Paul first. Who was your Dracula? Would you say is your personal favorite monster?
Dracula was my favorite. Frankenstein, or the monster rather, is probably my next favorite, followed by the Wolfman.
Nice. Okay, so Tom, how did you come into the fold growing up in the 70s?
I actually didn't start with the films. I actually started with a classic illustrated book about Dracula from way, way back. I remember being drawn to it as a kid in my small town home library. I would always be drawn to that because I loved the drawings. I loved how Dracula was portrayed. He truly came off the page larger than life. So that got me interested. That was what got my foot in the door. Then I started to watch Dracula whenever I could. As I've gotten older, I still like Dracula. It still holds a special place in my heart. Nowhere near a steak, by the way. But I've actually grown to love Frankenstein a lot more. The reason for that is because the story itself is what truly captivates. Yes, because it's almost like two different films in the same film. And I mean that as a good thing because you see the doctor doing whatever it took to make his creation, and then you can see the creation kind of realize itself. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to that third act, you have the conflict between the doctor's vision versus the monster's perception. And that creates a lot of great tension, it creates an atmosphere that I absolutely love. Plus I'm a science geek, so naturally I gravitate towards ones like Frankenstein and The Invisible Man. But that's not taking anything away from the others. But Frankenstein has become my favorite because of the story.
Yeah, the Jacob's Ladders really catch you in the any of your film versions.
There's definitely a lot of plot twists in some of these.
Yeah, and to go back to the visuals for a second, I just thought of something. I was looking back at the time frame. And I was thinking that maybe the reason why black and white pops so much is because it's very stark. You don't have the gradients like we do now. But on top of that, the backgrounds and settings, I want to say that was sort of influenced by silent movies and coming into more of coming more into as they experimented more with the medium. So maybe a lot of them came from a stage background. Where you have to make you definitely have to make things larger. You have to make things feel like they're right there. So I would say that would have as big of an influence as anything on how they put things together.
It's also way before any product placement.
Yes. Oh man. And I mean, you look at some of the more recent ones, obviously you could probably argue the 90s Mummy was probably the best successful by trying to have an old school kind of look. And then, Dracula Untold, I actually did not mind because it just had a really bad marketing campaign. And I kind of appreciated that Rick Baker was able to work on the Wolfman thing, but it just kind of had just too much kind of a little self-indulgent nature to it. When you see how it's like Universal was tempted to kind of steal some of that DC and Avengers money by just trying to do a big giant team up, and they were announcing who was going to play it. It's like, it doesn't have to be a giant team up, when they did Frankenstein against the Wolfman back in the day, it was just cool because it was kind of earned. Like that was just kind of the typical B movie attraction, and to just kind of just force a franchise on the public, obviously somebody's going to get lost in the way there, you got to actually kind of do it very naturally. And then when people actually just literally send you fan mail saying, I want more of what you have to offer, then it becomes very clear that the material is greater than even anyone else involved with it realized.
Well, you make them want it before they know they want it.
Yes. Don't give them cereal, feed them, and then take a poll afterwards of which one was well received.
And you have to realize too, with the Universal system, you had Jack Pierce doing the makeup, and he did some and people liked seeing that. They liked seeing Frankenstein's monster. They liked seeing the Wolfman. They liked seeing the Bride of Frankenstein.
And even follow-ups, there's more than just the bride. Now there's the son of Frankenstein.
Well,
a
lot of people mess that up because they think Frankenstein's the monster. No, Frankenstein is the doctor.
No,
the creature. The creature is the one they call him the creature. And here's the thing I always said: when you're watching the first Dracula movie, you're watching a stage play, because that's what it was. It was a stage play. Everything's filmed like a stage play.
Yeah, it's not the Mary Shelley version. It's not.
No, it's not. It's they took the Bram Stoker version.
Bram Stoker, yeah.
Bram Stoker version, and they had a play out already, and Lugosi was doing the play, and they said, okay, we're just going to film the play. And Todd Browning and Carl Freund did a great job of, setting that up. Then Frankenstein comes along, and that's more, interplaying than anything else.
Totally.
Because there's a lot more to do with the scenes. There's a lot more, again, Carl Freund filming stuff up from the ground, filming stuff up, over something. The photography, it doesn't give you the creeps, but what you're seeing is, a man creating a creature out of, a corpse.
Well,
right?
And I want to say I'm so glad you talked, Tom brought up the, we're talking about the creation aspect and I don't know if any of you are parents, but like, I'm a parent and I grew a person, and then now they're like, he's 7, but he's already like running amok in his own like little dude. And I know it's like a different context when it's a science experiment gone awry, but just that. And I think Shelley was writing about the experience of man as God's creation or whatever, so I don't mean to minimize that, but.
Well,
no, that's a good point too.
I always see Shelley as seeing him as Frankenstein, the guy who opens the Pandora's box, and
the monkey's paw.
Yeah. It's like this thing where, he's playing God, Frankenstein. He's playing God. And
he doesn't view him as an actual human, just someone he can keep experimenting on.
And he just sees him. And he goes, he's like, and if you ever see the movie, there was a part they cut out when he says, it's alive. Oh my God, it's alive. They cut that out in the original run because you couldn't say that in the movie.
Yeah, it was surviving both the code and then pre-code.
Yeah. But when you see the original movie, it's like he is playing God. He's taking the elements, the idea of like creating a life, out of a reanimated corpse, and that's what gets me,
Mm-hmm.
But the way the movies tone, those first 3 movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Bride of Frankenstein, they're very well paced and thought out. There's a love story I think in Frankenstein. There's not really a love story in Dracula. There's not really a love story in Bride of Frankenstein. But when you watch it, when you watch those first 3 that were so successful, there is this thing of like creating, destroying, it's this whole thing. It's like, okay, now everybody wants more. Like you said,
they built up to it all, and that there's a bigger portrait that they're trying to get into.
And I think what Universal did was the best thing, was that when they put the Mummy out in 32, that was kind of like a big, and they put out the Invisible Man. Now they're starting to branch their ground out a little more, And James Whale, who had done Frankenstein, did the Invisible Man, and I think he might have done the Mummy. I don't know who did the Mummy.
It was 1932, but yeah, and it seems like often it would be the first one featured, but it is kind of wild how it came later. Everyone was reacting mainly to the Wolfman and Dracula and Frankenstein, and it's just kind of wild how it, like you say, it naturally evolves. There's so much just kind of going into, again, just physical sets, local, well-known, pre-fame actors, and having to all just like, and when they did all these crossovers, and then, they just do natural spin-offs. It's like, let's talk about the bride, let's talk about son, let's talk about the other person. And I do kind of feel like the Creature from the Black Lagoon kind of suffers because it's kind of mainly trying to be kind of like pre-Godzilla movies mainly.
Oh, it's so good though. It's the best. It's my favorite one.
Okay.
That might be controversial.
No, it's fine. I like it. It's just, it's more like, I think as the sequels kind of go on, there's only 2 more of them, is like, it's kind of just mainly built around the monster's just going to go on a rampage versus the first one, which is kind of a treasure hunt. And then next thing you know, these 2 guys who are here to go after treasure and then do a measuring contest, fighting over a love triangle, that are then, endangered by this creature who's like, hey, you're in my turf, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, I love that, and we might talk about this more later, but just the themes of the movies are big, like we were just talking about huge. Some themes in Frankenstein, and like in Creature from the Black Lagoon, they're talking about like the interference in nature and like, what is our role when we're coming into like someone else's habitat, which is like, I think something we still need to have conversations about now,
right? All
these years later. And then like, so there's these big concepts, that the stories bring up that I think are why one of the reasons they retain interest after so much time, as well as being just works of art in and of themselves.
Yeah, and building off of what Amanda said, one of the things when going into this, I started to go back and think about the movies themselves and the stories behind them. And I started to see a few common themes, like some of them dealing with human nature. But in all the main ones, all the ones that we're dealing with here, there is a moral underneath it. It may not be easy to see, but when you start thinking about it, like with Frankenstein, you're dealing with the power of passion versus ethics, and what constitutes a life. With Dracula, you're dealing with the human nature of a creature that kind of straddles the line between humanity and beast and being a beast. And with Creatures of Black Lagoon, especially in the later sequels, not only did we talk about taking them out of nature, but we're also in the Creature Walks Among Us. That one really stuck out with me because it was basically saying you cannot take nature out of a creature. We are all, you can dress it up, you can do whatever you want, but nature is still nature, and you cannot control it. You cannot contain it. At some point,
years before we were doing disaster movies and having to have the same chat, we're having to remind everyone, you mistreat an animal, you don't get the right to complain when it finally, lashes out at you and finally bites you. It's like, well, you mistreated it. You abused it. You endangered it. And you endangered even more people by, this is what all the other, Experiment Gone bad movies basically pay tribute to, is like, don't touch what you don't have any right to touch.
The Invisible Man is when you talk about, science and nature and all that, The Invisible Man is one of the greatest stories that they ever filmed, the original, because it talks about the perversion of science for one man's ill-gotten greed. The guy played by the great Claude Rains. He
was already kind of like Vincent Price, good at playing either sleazy, sneaky, or just anti-hero kind of roles.
He could, and the thing that was that his claim to fame, Claude Rains, that was like his first big movie, and if you watch it, he's basically just doing the voice, but the voice is so sinister. It's like, I think we'll start with a few murders, then we'll, and he's like, it's like, he's got that thing on where he's like, the head's wrapped, he's got the big glasses and the hat and the coat and the fake nose, and and at first you're trying to giggle, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, now that then he begins this reign of terror, and it's like, oh, okay, now I understand what this, H.G. Wells wrote about that in that story, about how a man can be so perverted by science for his own ill-gotten gains,
That's awesome.
That's great about that. The Mummy too. You
should have never gone into that tomb and investigated it. Yeah.
You're not disturbed to be disturbed.
It was sealed.
Yeah.
You ignored the warning.
And it. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's definitely these like, almost like, I mean, maybe I'm, projecting as a American, but like these like puritanical like value, like there's this fear of the losing control, and this
we have it now,
like,
with all the other fear mongers,
to surrendering to our baser nature, and that like, and I thought a lot about like, not to like politicize in any way, but like figuring out as a female viewer, like it's always interesting to see what the archetypes are there as well. Because in that mythology, women are supposed to be the gentle influence, right? That like, tames the beast, right? And like, when is that archetype like followed in these stories, and when is it like subverted a little bit, and so that was just something interesting I was thinking about as I was watching it as well.
Fortunately, a lot of them get to understand the creature and either defend it or, tell everyone to lay off, distract the bad guys who are trying to kill the creatures, or, and half the time, all these gunmen are coming out and they don't even know why they're, trying to kill it, other than they're spooked, or they got, a bigger boss to answer to, who happens to be the mad scientist.
Well,
there's a lot of good soundtracks to all these movies that I don't know if they've ever officially been released.
They've never. I know that with Dracula, they did the Philip Glass score.
Oh.
And then what they used to do is they had the Rite of Spring played for Dracula. They really didn't have that much in the way for Dracula, nor for Frankenstein, The Mummy, and I think maybe The Invisible Man. They may have done some music, but you got to realize it wasn't the thing. It was the story that was driving the movie around.
But, totally. There's plenty of moments where it's just dead silence, but it works because not only is it, a pre-movie, and don't get me wrong, if you're introducing other film buffs to it, you're going to have to tell them, hey, put your goddamn phone down and concentrate here. This is a slow burn kind of movie.
But like when you look at it, they have those first 4 or 5 movies come out, and then Universal begins to go into other territory with horror. And the first thing they do is they make a movie called The Black Cat.
Yes.
With
Lugosi.
With Lugosi and Karloff, where Lugosi plays a man bent on revenge because Karloff killed his wife. And it's got one of the best lines I've ever heard in a movie where the guy goes, he says, "I've given you a powerful narcotic." He says, "Sounds like a supernatural baloney to me." And Lugosi turns to the guy and says, "Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not."
We'll return after these messages.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
We're on all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
They do that. Then they do Werewolf of London with Henry Hull.
Yep.
Which is a very,
it's in the recent collection too, so it's definitely long overdue for rediscovery.
And then they do The Raven.
Raven, yeah. Edgar Allan Poe, Hesitation.
The Invisible Ray. I'm looking at this stuff right now. Dracula's Daughter, which is kind of like, it's lost in the shuffle a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know if they just weren't able to remaster it or MGM dispute or.
Well, yes, no, it was, I think Universal did do it. Okay. But a lot of it was kind of a little controversial for his time because here she was a female vampire going after a woman. You know, so it's kind of, we're kind of like, oh, okay, you know,
They're finally branching out, and like Amanda said, they're also giving all the humans something different to do instead of just mad townsmen who instantly go and pick up torches, burn them,
burn all down.
Damn women be Homo sapiens.
Yes, torture, because torture solves shit. It doesn't.
Torture.
Carry a torch or a pitchfork. Some people carried both.
They do Tower of London, which is kind of a real strange. It's not strange, really. It's basically Richard III.
That's a good way. They do kind of, they have a lot of Shakespeare inspired.
It's like Basil Rathbone's in it, the guy who's going to play Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah.
And
Sherlock
Karloff's
versus Frankenstein. I'd see it.
Yeah. And then you have, what's the one?
There's Captain Wild Woman, and then there's Invisible Agent, which is another take on Invisible Man.
Yeah. Then then they start doing the Frankenstein movies again, and there's Son of Frankenstein. Now, who here has seen Young Frankenstein, the Mel Brooks movie?
Oh,
it's one of my favorite movies ever.
That's Frankenstein.
Okay.
Werewolf. Werewolf.
Watch Young Frankenstein. Watch Son of Frankenstein, and Young Frankenstein. You'll get some of the bits, like when they're in the castle and the stairs are going up. I was like, oh my God, now I know where Brooks got it from. It was the first Frankenstein movie, but this was the big one because this had the one where he meets the blind beggar.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's just it. Yeah. Because everyone thought he just made up half the characters. It's like, no, he's taking segments from the movies.
I love when he busts, because then the funny thing is John Carradine comes in as a hunter, says, "What's going on? That's the monster? What a monster! I don't know, monster." And Son of Frankenstein has Bela Lugosi in it.
Yes. Yeah, there's lots of crossover, and they were literally all in the same lot, like all employed by Universal. So they, even if they didn't have another sequel coming out, they were constantly just getting on the next one.
They break Yegor's neck, but they didn't do a good job.
Which now begs the question of whether Bela Lugosi ever did a rendition of Night Train to Mundofina.
Oh my God. Yeah, so Amanda, we're big Mystery Science Theater guys, so we are referencing plenty of other trashy, goofy movies here.
It took you all the way to hell.
On a broken cigarette and a penny.
Mondo, more like stupido.
Drink a lot of Night Train, go to the basketball game. But it got me how they would do Son of Dracula and they put Lon Chaney Jr. in that role, and it didn't fit for him. But then he does The Wolfman, which I think is one of the most amazing movies ever to watch.
Totally. And then don't forget, is it Dracula versus Frankenstein that he appears in? He appears in another one down the road.
He appears in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yeah, but there's like some other one, like Frankenstein.
I want to say
no.
I want to say there was one where they did Frankenstein. I would think it was Dracula versus Frankenstein or something like that.
It wasn't canon. It wasn't part of Universal, but it was kind of funny how if he wasn't being employed by Universal at the time, he just had to cross over with some other.
There's a Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 1971's Dracula versus Frankenstein. Place
which has Dracula with an afro and Carol Nash, and I think it's
like Blackula.
It's Lon Chaney Jr.'s last movie. He's got cancer at that point, and they're trying to, and you can tell he's not talking as well as he should. His voice sounds totally different. But The Wolfman, I love because of
great old costume and makeup.
Yeah. But I love the old lady in it. What was her name? Maria Openskaya. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to read you what she says in the movie. She's the old gypsy lady.
Okay.
Okay. This is what I love about when Amanda, you know who Gilbert Gottfried is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. He had that podcast. He used to do a bit from the Wolfman. It says, "The way you walked was stormy through no fault of your own. But as rain enters the soil, the rivers enter the sea, so tears run to a predestined end. Now you will have peace and eternity." And, it's the wolf. This is, and he kills the wolf, right? Who's Bela Lugosi, but we don't see his. You killed the wolf. Well, there's no crime in that, is there? The wolf was Bela. You think I don't know the difference between a wolf and a man? Bela turned into a wolf and you killed him. A werewolf can only be killed by a silver bullet, a silver knife, or a stick with a silver handle. You're insane, I tell you. I killed a wolf, a plain, ordinary wolf. And she's talking to, I'm sorry if I'm doing this, she's talking to Claude Rains, who's in this movie. She's like, "You are not frightened, are you, Sir John?" "Frightened? Frightened of what?" "Of the night." "Rubbish, you startled me." "Don't be startled, Sir John. You have a silver cane for protection." Who are you? Hasn't your son told you? You're the gypsy lady that's been filling his mind with this werewolf nonsense. A man turning into a wolf. We have superstitions, but a man turning into a wolf? No, it's preposterous. Just talk of pentagrams. You're not a child, man. You're a grown man, and you have to believe in the superstitions of a gypsy woman. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm liking that hissing that you're injecting in there.
Well, that lead, I think that, and again, I'm not trying to, I am Darren's wife, so I might be trying to politicize things a little bit, but I'm, it leads you to the role, it's interesting the role that the native, or indigenous people of the different lands that the monster movies take place, the role that they play. And of course, whenever we're talking about old movies, we have to deal with racism is to some extent because it's just everywhere.
Exaggerate the voodoo a bit.
Some of those
the style all the time.
Yeah. It is interesting to see the role that those people tend to play. And of course it's its own archetype that we could talk about, but trying to tell our white male hero or anti-hero, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know the area, you don't know what you're talking about, you're completely unfamiliar with what's happening, and that clash of what is considered the Western knowledge base or whatever, and then
yes, because you disagree with me, you're inferior.
Well, you got to think too. The first Dracula movie, Renfield steps off the coach, and the guy goes, "You are here for overnight?" "No, I have to take a carriage to the Borgo Pass." "To the Borgo Pass? You don't go to the Borgo Pass. You stay here tonight." And it's supposed to be a Romanian culture. That's what, because you got to realize Eastern Europe, we didn't know much about it back then, And so they would always have these semi-comic characters come in.
That's their exposition. You don't go there.
But when you see the Wolfman, the woman, the old gypsy lady, she drives the story a lot.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a racial thing. It was a racial thing when a black guy would see, and I'm saying this right now, I'd watch these old movies, and it was White Zombie with Bela Lugosi. I think Mantan Moreland was in it or something like that. And he's they'd be "Why, he turned into a ghost."
Right, really overdone.
Yeah.
Very enunciated. And that's not, and this is before we get to the fact that half the roles are, once again, Westerners playing, foreign roles, which is like, no, you're so not Native American or African or whatever the hell you're playing.
It's like, but you got to realize, like, when they did like some of those movies, they did get people who were, Russian or, Eastern European who had done, they'd done that stuff. So, I don't agree with some of the things that Universal did back then, with how things were. But, you got to think that you're looking at a movie where, the guy's a fish out of water, like in Dracula or like in Frankenstein,
Actually, a lot of them kind of follow a Tarzan kind of routine where the adventurer happens to be the bad guy for once, and he's basically just driven out of town. They don't really have as much social commentary, but it's enough for the right people to get it. I was even just realizing Captain Wild Woman, I didn't realize that was part of the lot, with Man-Made Monster as well and Indestructible Man.
I saw Man-Made Monster. Ooh.
Yeah, and those kind of go even looser with the experiment gone wrong, and they're almost always in like some jungle that they're trying to take over for personal gain. So like Amanda and JJ are harping on, it is easier to kind of root for the villains, comeuppance and inevitable death, because it's like they're already in a place which signifies nothing but just personal gain to them.
Well, I always love when they would like, they did like when you watch like one of those Republic B pictures.
Yes.
And they're like it's Karloff, Karloff is doing it just for the paycheck. And like he's in the middle of the jungle and the guy's going, "Where's Dr. Hobson's house?" He's like, "White Man house that way." And it's like, a bunch of, and it's like all these guys dressed in long, and you're just like, oh Jesus, please, I don't want to see this ever again.
You're not Indian, you're not a servant, you're not, and this slavery was already wrong, so it's already bad enough as it is that we're seeing one of the heroes that happens to have a servant going along with him who ends up as a victim.
What do you guys think of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein? I love that movie.
I still recall it being pretty fun. Invisible Man was the first one I saw, and I just felt like it was a little weaker. But the Mummy segment was pretty cool.
What, the Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy?
No, the Invisible Man.
Oh yeah.
I feel like they were running.
That was probably the weakest one out of the ones they did.
And that says a lot because the Keystone Cops are also in it.
No, Jekyll and Hyde is the worst. I think Dr. Jekyll, Meet Jekyll and Hyde.
I think I've seen that one. Yeah,
but there's something about Lou Costello and Bud Abbott when he says, "Did you see Dracula's candle move?"
Yeah,
Dracula's candle move.
He's always just losing his shit, out of breath.
And then there's the one part where Lon Chaney Jr.
I love those guys.
Oh yeah, the one part I love is when he says, "At midnight I turned to a wolf, you and a million other guys."
You and a million other guys. Man.
Yeah, that joke makes a lot more sense when you're older.
This is why we have all this time as kids to be watching these and then grow up and rewatch. We're actually paying attention to the dialogue and the sets.
Wilbur, I will put your brain in the monster. Then you will live forever. You want to put my brain in the monster? Well, what are you going to do with the monster?
Oh, man.
Well,
trying to remember. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead because I cut you off before. So.
I know Vincent Price isn't one of them, but he's just making a cameo as himself.
He should have been.
No, he's in one of them.
He plays the Invisible Man at the end of Frankenstein. Because don't you know who I am? I'm the Invisible Man.
Yes.
Because they couldn't do it because Boris Karloff was going to do Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer. No, Abbott and Costello were going to do Meet the Killer Boris Karloff.
Oh shit! Conflict of interest.
So they kind of kept, and they made Price the one that was going to do the cameo at the end.
Very nice.
And I'll say
this
that
is before
that
Glenn
was
Strange plays the creature.
Yeah, Glenn
but-
Strange.
but the end-
Anyway, sorry.
But the ending-
Go ahead, Amanda. Before
the
Thomas.
ending was what I remember most about Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, because it, even as a kid, it was like, that's Invisible Man. That set something up.
I knew the guy from
absolutely loved
somewhere. Anyway, go ahead, Amanda.
Well, no, I'm kind of taking it in a different direction, but just talking about like watching things as kids and then watching them as an adult. And I mentioned that I have a 7-year-old and he watched some of these movies with me. And so it's so interesting to like see his perspective, in a
totally different world, totally different interests. I was just fortunate enough that when I wasn't watching movies, I was always reading movie history books, sometimes with photos. So I always had I would always know enough about something, and they were pretty good at not spoiling everything, but just summing up the cultural phenomenon, and more than just so-and-so won an Oscar for their portrayal of the monster or what have you. And I didn't always have that. My dad was a genre guy. My mom was just kind of like, well, I'm a Carol Burnett Star Trek gal, and my sister would do more just reading up on famous Hollywood scandals, and my brother didn't care about any of that. He was a baseball guy, so I was the oldest. I was just all
what a weirdo.
Right?
Well, I was the weirdo. I was just like, who's this kid who's quiet and reads just movie history books all day? It's this guy.
I was talking about the baseball guy. What a weirdo.
I mean, he's pretty good at what he does, but he's less weird than me. Anyway, ironically. So I do feel you. It is interesting just seeing it in today's lens. And when you're on streaming, you can only watch certain versions or certain remasters. And kudos to the Universal, 4K Blu-ray department. They're already offering another collection upgrade to 4K. Obviously, they're not able to get all the ones, but the last remaster was in 2018, from what I'm seeing here, the complete. And it's still not complete, but they offered at least way more. There were still ones missing, like Murders in the Rue Morgue, just a lot of the one-offs, but they got way more bigger ones, like Captive Wild Woman.
Well, here's the thing that gets me is like Universal, when they shifted the monsters away from the monsters, because that got kind of tiring after a while, they started doing like Tarantula, the giant mantis.
Yeah, just and trying to get the success of them or some other giant, creature.
And that was the scary thing, because that was the atomic age.
And this is before we're getting into George Romero territory, where now people are reminding each other horror movies are cautionary tales, and social commentary is very well, merited. The monster represents the nuke. Yeah.
If you've ever seen Tarantula, that movie is like, and they did the Shrinking Man too.
Tarantula is interesting how it's like, it's also kind of like where so many like later day tough guys get like, their first star. I know Clint Eastwood, I think, is like a freaking fighter pilot at the end.
Yeah, he's the fighter pilot in that movie.
But
I thought he was a scientist.
That's the creature too.
Revenge of the Creature.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Revenge of the Creature. He's the one who he's trying to look for the mouse. He doesn't realize the mouse is in his pocket. And when they did that on Mystery Science Theater, they're like, this guy didn't do anything after that. Yeah, he never really got it.
Yeah.
I always remember that commentary. This guy, years before becoming an NRA supporter.
Go ahead.
So which creature do you think ultimately wins in a fight? If we do a Godzilla style matchup. Do you think the creature can suck the blood of Dracula? Do you think? Oh, okay, so Frankenstein goes on a rampage.
Frankenstein is powerful.
I really don't know what can even kill the guy. Even if you electrocute him, he's probably just going to pass out for maybe a decade and come back to life.
Well, it's fire, from what I remember. Like fire, he was afraid of.
Fire is afraid of, but
I think fire gives him pain.
I mean, I can see the Wolfman burning him, maybe, or something. But
the wolf. the Wolfman would.
It's a little more cowardly lion, kind of.
Yeah, he would. But I mean, like, if you think about like the Wolfman would probably like try to rip him apart, but Frankenstein would probably like take him and throw him down like a cliff or something like that. Dracula, I'm just like, I don't know. It's like you put Dracula in a fight, what's he gonna do? Hypnotize somebody? No,
disappear and reappear.
Can Dracula command the Wolfman?
No, he can't.
Good question. Yeah, because
just had to put it out there. It crossed my mind.
Some versions it does seem like he can do telekinesis or something.
Dracula can only command those who are under his power. So if it was the Wolfman, he couldn't do it. But if it was a man or a woman he bit, he could do that.
He could do it.
I think if it was a hammer Dracula, he would ultimately win because he always seems to come back.
Oh yes, that is my favorite iteration. Christopher Lee. Maybe I think Dracula could turn the Bride of Frankenstein against Frankenstein. Maybe.
No.
All
right. No.
She's pretty awesome. I'm just saying.
Go ahead.
Now,
you first.
I'm surprised nobody mentioned the Invisible Man in this.
We did.
Yeah.
I think the Wolfman would tear him apart.
Well, I mean, if he could find him. Exactly. And there's I'm not sure if there's any indication that that in the Wolfman has the wolf's heightened sense of smell.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
I do kind of feel like
League
of Extraordinary Gentlemen did a fun kind of play on the Invisible Man by just showing how.
But the Invisible Man doesn't really need to fight until the very end. He could hide for as long as it takes, and let the bigger and stronger ones kind of wear themselves out, and then using the
attack.
All he has to do to find the Invisible Man is do a swift kick somewhere, and he'll go, "Oh!" That's all you got to do to beat the Invisible.
Gotta get him in the snow. Isn't that what we learned?
Yeah,
that's right. And this is
dad.
assuming Van Helsing isn't in this match either, in a tower somewhere, ready to shoot a crossbow.
They get him in the snow in the movie because he's walking, and they find the tracks. And remember, they're all grouped together.
Yep.
Nobody. The best part of that is Una O'Connor, who plays the old lady. She's like, "Hey, I brought you your supper. What are you looking at? Nothing at all. Nothing." And she runs out, and she tells her, "Oh, I swear he has nothing underneath those bandages. Nothing."
Nothing. No, nothing. Oh, man.
What do you think about the humor aspect? That's always something that's really interesting to me in horror generally.
Because not everyone has an aunt or grandparent they can watch these with, especially nowadays. So it is a good question. It's like, who could you find you would probably want a film historian or someone else who's just, a book nerd to probably join in on the chat with you. Watch it.
There's something funny about Dracula that I've always loved. It's Renfield.
Oh yeah.
It's
Renfield.
Because Dwight Fry, for that role, when he goes totally nutso ape shit, and he's in there's somebody in the boat. There's somebody down in the galley, and it just opens it up. And you see him. He's like, and then he's like, "Renfield, do you know about Dracula? Dracula? I'd never heard of such a man. Rats, thousands of rats he's promised me. Their eyes red."
I'm loving your voiceovers, my dude. But no, that these are all great questions because this is like sometimes the comedic idiot ends up being the spotter who spots the monster or unintentionally attracts the attack mob to the creature, or gives the mad scientist a hint that even they weren't smart enough to come up with. It's just like they all have. Everyone is all interconnected here, and it's all. It pretty much gets you revved up for the inevitable, shocking, and very violent finale.
Well, I'll tell you, there's nothing about like some of those movies. Like if you watch The Wolfman, okay, there's no really humorous character.
No,
but if you write Dr. Pretorius is actually the first real gay character on screen.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You watch it, he's like, he smokes the cigarette and he's like, I made these myself. Like he looks at like Victor Frankenstein, like,
what do you have?
No, I mean, no, if you watch it, he's a very flamboyant character, and, with the Mummy, I don't remember. Well, Frankenstein, there's the old Baron, Victor's, I think, grandfather or father.
Mm-hmm.
But he goes up there to see Victor, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like the old man who basically just wants his son to be a good person and not toy around with anything, But
how good he was at accomplishing that.
Out of medical school, and he's like, are you trying to create life out of nothing? He's like, and he's just but there's certain things you got to start laughing at when you watch some of these movies, just the performances of some people.
There are going to be some over the top ones, and it's just part of how dated it is, but it does add an extra charm, fortunately.
Dwight Fry, I think that goes so over the top.
I don't think anyone was giving him notes. It's like, act.
Life. You promised me life. No, I won't do it. I won't.
Yep. He's got to do it. He's got to interject his voice in there somewhere.
If Universal were to ever do these movies again,
I'm worried.
I'm worried. I'm scared they're going to that somebody's going to take something the wrong way and be insulted by it. What you have to think is, okay, you could tweak the script a little bit, but there are some things in some of those movies you're like, no, we won't be doing that. Like Dracula, to have the Romanian people, dressed up. First off, it takes place in Romania, but they're dressed like Germans.
Yeah, I can't redo that.
But it was like, the thing was cracking up. Was like everybody who was Eastern European did not know how to speak correct English. You want to go to castle?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an opportunity. Well, I think we all live in fear of the remake, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, even when I saw Van Helsing, I felt like that was a missed opportunity because it had a lot of labor of love, and it just felt kind of unorganized with bringing all the creatures on screen.
But there is like opportunity. I mean, there's also opportunity. There's fear there, but there's also opportunity. And I think, again, don't want to take the conversation total out of topic, but like I think about something like Prey for the Predator series, which I know had a lot of controversy around it, but like what a cool opportunity.
A very progressive Native American movie and just a very cool just origin story.
Yeah.
Like, here's the first hunter who went against the infamous creature.
Yeah. And so
had a chance using the old school technique, camp out, use the darkness, anything it could do, but
that was smart too, because it showed how it was when I think it was the colonials were showing up there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
and what a shame it had to go to streaming to be a hit. Streaming is the new age of made for TV direct to video. And now everyone's fortunately, after oversaturating themselves, I think you guys are onto something. I think this is now the new home this is where the experiments are going to go. I mean, there's already this new Hellraiser coming out that's anticipated. I'm looking forward to it because I'm a big Jamie Clayton fan.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone's finally kind of coming out of the woodwork a bit and just saying, hey, we don't have to worry about what we made it for or anything, or the box office return, or investors that are attracted by whatever famous name we're putting in this. Now, we can give a chance to a bunch of these other indie cult movie guys. Have you guys seen any of the movies that Christopher R. memes? Okay, so that's a no. That's a big ass no.
Don't believe so anyway.
He's since around 09-ish, he's been I can spell his name out for you guys. He's been doing a lot of just like ever since just making movies in his backyard. Literally, he's been doing a lot of tributes to 50s type creature features, and so I would not be surprised if he tries to do his version of a classic like Universal homage.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Amanda. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, again, I challenge me here, but like, I feel like trying to make, if there were remakes, like trying to make like a shot for shot remake of.
Yeah, let's not have a Psycho 98 tobacco.
Exactly. Like, exactly.
All right.
Sorry,
I know. Don't do a shot for shot remake. Do your own twist on it, right?
Exactly. And like, so there's opportunity to, revisit these classic stories in a way that could be challenging, could be fun, but that leaves the originals intact. You know what I'm saying? At least
Totally.
That's my dream.
Yeah.
Well, no, I would hope for that because we do have more progressive crowds and we have kicked a lot of the shitheads in Hollywood out. There's no more John Peters or Weinsteins, and some of the other, like Amy Pascal at Sony and some of the other just dickheads who, like I love Joel Silver, but he left Hollywood fortunately at a good time. No one could stand his angry temper tantrums. No one wants to work with that.
The thing is that they just greenlit Nosferatu. If anybody saw that, they greenlit Nosferatu.
They're really going to try that again.
They're going to try making it again, but I'm going to say this: don't screw up. Number one, don't screw up the story. Number two, don't make the makeup like somebody did it in their backyard. Make it look like Max Schreck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody.
I still think that is one of the creepiest looking film monsters ever.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Absolutely.
Don't. Everybody who tries to do the makeup never gets it right. And, the only time I saw them do it right was Werner Herzog's 79 version, which I think is like what you said, Amanda, put a twist on it where the vampire wants to die.
Right. I mean, I've been kind of burnt out on some of the Disney remakes because it's just very easy for them to do. But I kind of dug the Maleficent, how they twisted it around. Here's her viewpoint.
Yeah, that was pretty good, actually.
You have all these Lord of the Rings type battles and then other Kingdom sword and sandal type intrigue. So it's not just, a villainess getting revenge. Wicked meets, the Dark Knight, I call it.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say
it's all good. We're all animated here, so it's good.
It's fun, to have these. I think it's fun to revisit stories, and so I don't want to say out of hand that that's bad. I would say that my little heart would love to see, and I'm not against computer effects in any way. I think they do a lot of really cool, fun things.
Well, and that's just it. Post Jurassic Park, there's been plenty of big techniques, and a lot of the people who hate CGI, they're kind of as bad as like people who get into politics. They're like, I hate that. I'm like, okay, so what's the substitute? Oh, I don't have an answer. Well, so why do you care if you're just going to bitch,
Right. But I do love a good practical effect. And I do think for me, blending
explosions.
Yeah. Blending the two is especially when we're talking about like horror, monster horror.
Yeah.
I love to see a good blend of I love the old practical effects.
Even some of the action guys.
Practical effects, to me, I think blend in a lot better with CGI.
There's people who can do both.
CGI is done right. It looks good.
But there's people
cases,
still doing
it looks terrible.
I mean, Walter Hill has a new Western coming out. I'm sure he was able to get some practical stuff. Martin Campbell and Antoine Fuqua, I think, both make great use of practical and CGI. So, for instance, the bloody squibble hit the guy in the chest or in the head, and then the rest is like just some CGI that sprays everywhere, or just, Paul's a Doctor Who fan. I remember seeing one a few years back that was a good, perfect example. The exhaust hitting the ground is practical, but the CGI blast obviously is a laser, added in post.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you can do, like you say, you can do both. You look at Spielberg's early, student films when he was a kid. He practically, they even played it in the recent HBO documentary about 5 years ago. Is like he's literally, his friends would jump on a plank, which makes it look like there's an explosion behind him. The sand, uproars behind him. Is like there's so many different techniques that and I think Rick Baker, who sadly just retired, from Hollywood many years back, almost half a decade ago, is like, because he was just sick of playing this whole game. How much money will it take versus how will it look? Is like, people have to understand what they're talking about, let alone working with, before they can say yes or no to any of this. And unfortunately, many just want to keep taking shortcuts. And
it's not only that, but it's like, you designed something like a creature from the Black Lagoon. That was a suit. That wasn't a guy in a green suit.
And this was pre-safety,
Yeah.
So
this is a guy named Rico Browning, who was a licensed diver. This guy taught, and he was in that suit. And you got to realize, it's a practical suit. If you look at something like I've always said the thing about Planet of the Apes, right? When you watch the Planet of the Apes movie, that was who was the guy who did that? I keep forgetting who did the makeup for that. The original Planet of the Apes, that was tried and true, prosthetics and stuff like that.
And you got to treat your entire crew, you can't treat them like garbage. Dick Smith, the legendary Dick Smith. But you got to have some good wardrobe. You got to have a good stunt coordinator. I mean, I was hearing one of the guys who worked on one of the Ewok movies, and he noted how all the portrayers of the Ewoks literally had to, they couldn't see in their outfits when they actually put it on, post break. So they had to count to themselves while walking in what they thought was the left or right direction. Is like 1, 2, 3, fall down here, or jump up here. And so you do need a lot of good coordination. You do need a lot of, like Amanda and JJ, you are both harping on, is like, you got to calculate this all. There's got to be a good line producer who also has it in their passions. Like, okay, 20 million is going to go to effects, 20 million extra is going to go to, obviously makeup and wardrobe. And pretty much you could cast an unknown cast. And I think that would appeal to it more. You wouldn't have all this, oh, fuck it, I'm not watching it, Tom Cruise is in it. You wouldn't have all this, prejudice build up before it's even out. You're not distracted by the famous faces. Now you're just going because, like Star Wars, it's in the name,
I mean, you look at someone like Lon Chaney, who was the man of 1,000 faces.
Oh, yeah.
See makeup that he did for. Now, I've seen pictures of him putting the makeup on for Phantom of the Opera. Okay.
It's pretty wild, right?
It's pretty wild. It shows him like before he puts the dentures in. It's him and Mary Philbin, and I think the guy who directed it was Rupert Mamillion. They're outside and they're filming the scene, and he comes by and he's got like he's partially dressed as the Phantom, right? Yeah. And you see he's got the case with him, the case that he used, and that was this is before guys were doing makeup. That's what makes Universal so fun. The makeup, the way the monsters were made up.
When we're figuring out about temperature and when it's got to be applied, practically some actors having to sleep in it, all night long. Yeah. And I could see Andy Serkis and Peter Jackson probably getting into it somewhere down the road, or producing someone who wants to do some kind of tribute to this saga. The question is ultimately, would Universal, give the money for it, or would they try and be cheap?
I think Universal was going to try to restart the monster franchises, and the money tanked with Tom Cruise.
That was so bad.
And I just was like, thank God that, because
and it didn't help that Tom Cruise apparently bullied Alex Kurtzman, who's now in charge of the Star Trek franchise, and basically made him his bitch. He was like, I'm going to direct and rewrite everything. Duly noted. You can't have people who are just taking shit over like that. And I mean, then, like you say, they're trying to set it up to where it's all interconnected, but it's not earned. It's like everyone going into it didn't know that Russell Crowe was playing Van Helsing. It just didn't.
Yeah.
It did not register. It's like everybody's just left to their own devices without any notes.
It's Dr. Jekyll.
Dr. Jekyll, my bad. Either way, yeah. He was acting in a so atypical way. You're just like, wait, what? Where is this? Yeah. And so when people try to just kind of, when they include Easter eggs at the end, it should be after everything else is done. It shouldn't be. It's like, let's get all too cute for our own good and leave, 50 more pages that we have to film, on the cutting room floor. And I think it just doesn't help that, when you write a script, all your actions that you're describing last only a few sentences. A 20-minute, monster rampage or fight scene lasts literally a quarter of a page,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to figure it all out after the fact, how many shots to linger on, how to generate suspense, how many gaffers you need for a crane shot. It is crazy. And kudos to those who have still been in it and have been able to live all the horror stories for real. I do feel like there are other makeup guys who've been around forever who would still be able to do it. Years ago, I would have said Stan Winston. I don't really know what his creature effects shop is up to these days, but
I don't know if Stan Winston his effects were always, the makeup was always amazing for the stuff he did.
I mean, because those were effects in and of itself. I mean, I know his school is still going, so that's cool. Well, this has been a delight just having you all on here. Been a delight meeting Amanda, and I feel like we all just kind of hyped up on these are always just going to be bound to be discovered. Like, I can't think of anyone who hasn't either grown up on them or is about to become a fan. Like, they've been reissued so many different times, and they're almost always on Turner Classic or antenna channels. Yeah.
They're all either on Tubi now. Or
really?
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Svengoolie was showing a lot of them recently, and that was a lot of fun. He did one that just literally almost made me shit my pants. I am not kidding. Like, he was doing a funny Frankenstein rap and making it look like he was hitting the bongo drums and doing some percussion. He was re-editing it and make it, and usually you're used to just the simple thing where it looks like he's walking into a scene to remind everyone that the movie's back, but this was just like, oh my God. And of course, like Elvira and Joe Bob, he'll do the movie trivia, but it was really a hoot.
Do you guys know that Lugosi was asked to play Frankenstein in 1932?
I think I heard the stories, but I didn't know the politics behind it, why he turned it down or didn't get picked.
He didn't want to wear the makeup.
Who's going to oddly enough, he did play Frankenstein's monster in another movie.
The Wolfman. Oh, no, it was Abbott and Costello versus Frankenstein because Glenn Strange broke his foot at one point or something like that. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Nowadays, how much would you say makeup takes to apply now? I still hear 3 hours, but back around the 80s to 90s, especially the 90s, Lord knows how much back then. It would often take 5 hours.
I'm guessing 3 hours is probably about the minimum these days.
Yeah, but that if you don't want someone storming off, and that's just it. You have to find out the hard way whether the so-called visionary is working, on budget, on time, or versus, you're having the makeup applied, but then finding out that it's malfunctioning. You can't afford to have any other screw ups. Everyone's got to feel like something is getting done.
Exactly.
I always laugh a little bit at when I see pictures of Karloff in the makeup, and he was like real thin under that whole outfit. He was like really a thin guy. But you see a lot of behind the scenes footage of him, with the makeup. And I found out the reason why his cheeks were so sunken was because he had dentures, and he took the dentures out, and that's why his face looks so sunken when he's dressed up, when he's done up as the monster.
He definitely has just so many moments where it just seems like his head's not in the clouds, but it is definitely somewhere else. Like something important is happening.
You mean Frankenstein?
Frankenstein, but yeah, definitely Lugosi a bit. And I mean, again, a lot of them are stage actors or were used to being the guys in the creature suits. But yeah, I mean, with the heat, they were definitely losing a lot of weight. Those long hours.
Naturally a thin man. Karloff. He was very thin. He was very tall too. But I can imagine it's like with Fred Gwynn when he was doing the Munsters. He'd lose like 10 pounds of water a day when he was filming because that suit was so heavy on him.
Oh wow!
But the thing with Karloff I love is when he said he was doing an interview. He says the way I articulated the monster was that he was like a small child, basically to reach out to his father or his mother. He's like, like that. And then when the monster starts talking, he's like, good, bad. Oh, good. You and I die together. Bride of Frankenstein.
Man. Oh man. Are there any more recent books that anyone recommends reading that talk about the making of some of these things? It seems like a lot of those are now collector's items or less published around maybe 92.
I don't know if there are.
It seems like you see them in snippets in some movie history books, but you're better off just, I guess, listening to a commentary track or going to a site that's dedicated to it.
Yeah.
But some of those are like GeoCities era where they did not, update past 03, 07. So.
But I'm trying to think of something to say here and I can't.
It's all good. It's been a long day.
Long day for me.
Teach some music after all, my dude.
I think we're gonna have to do that. But yeah, the thing that gets me the most about Universal stuff is that it never really downgraded in quality.
Yeah. I mean, even with MGM and Hammer trying to do their own thing, they always pretty much had their eyes set on the prize. Okay, let's do a new one and just have a new cast and crew and let them take it off. It kind of evolves more naturally before, unlike say maybe James Bond where, they're going with so many different tones and focusing so much on the different, places to film and the soundtrack that they kind of forget the plots.
Yeah, James Bond turned 60 yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Everyone growing up watching these with their parents and wondering, oh, wow.
Yes, Money Penny.
I could see Sean Connery fighting the woman. I'll take Frankenstein for 500, Trebek.
I'll take your mama for 5.
Oh,
she wanted
you pig.
Wait, I don't want to say it because I don't want to offend anybody here, but she was going to take. I gave her 5, but she looked like a cheap. No, Mr. Connery.
You're an asshole.
Now, I will do a plug here for those who. This is a guilty pleasure of mine, but because of the subject matter, I almost think I have to put in a plug for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I love that one. It's.
Well said.
I mean, yeah, it's nothing like the comic, which it
was fun.
Like Watchmen is filled with all kinds of betrayals, rape, and gore. And this one, I mean, with Sean Connery attached, I mean, just the beginning alone, that reminded me of Dr. No when he, encounters a traitor who's just taken a cyanide pill, and then the rest is basically kind of Indiana Jones adventure. Yeah, with Fox's hand in it, you can kind of see where it's trying to be a little like X-Men, and it's the director of Blade, and it's a shame that I think everyone, yes, more people have just heard the behind the scenes stories of the actor and director hating each other's guts, and compared to how many people have actually seen it, and
it was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but it wasn't really Dr. Jekyll, or
yeah, not really, but it was a fun kind of twist, and I forget was it Peter Wilson or the Nikita gal? Yeah, and I forget who she played, but she was playing a
Mina Harker.
Mina Harker,
yeah,
okay. And then they had Captain Nemo, who I thought was really well done.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I actually tried looking around for other stuff that actor had been in, and it hadn't been much because he really did steal the show as Captain Nemo. Kind of give it a fun, classy. Nemo.
He was awesome at that.
And you got to like a guy who just like is just fearless. He is bringing literally a sword to a gunfight. He's like, but I got the ship.
Captain, no, he doesn't die in that, right?
No, he doesn't die, but he's often in a lot of scenarios where there's gunplay going off, and he's still just kind of like a Highlander, just standing around, just proud with the sword. He's a Zorro.
Yeah, well,
plus he had the car.
He did have a car, and I think that's it. I saw so many other people who turned it off the minute Tom Sawyer enters the picture, and I was just like, I don't have a problem with Shane West. I know he's kind of eye candy, but he's kind of cool. It's Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, and the reason I brought up League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is because there's a lot of it that is a homage to the Universal monsters.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss if I didn't call that out, because it was
definitely a labor of love. It's just and for the most part, most critics, the only nice thing they would say is, I like the shots, I like the cinematography and set design. Is like, well, I mean, it says a lot, because they were doing more than just using James Bond locations. They were using, just some other parts of Europe that hadn't ever been filmed. And it's not all green screen, but I can see why, like what Amanda was hitting on before is like, it's easy for those who already reject something or aren't into a story to just assume everything is all green screen or everything is all practical. It's like, no, it's a little bit of everything. It's just, you're getting caught up with the stuff you don't like, and it's like a pill. You're just spitting it out.
Yeah. And to Amanda's point, Mina Harker played a really good, had a really good role in it. She was not only the scientist, but she was a vampire badass.
Yeah.
She was a vampire, but she wasn't a vampire. She was like, she had Dracula's blood in her.
Yes.
Like
that was a fun twist on it too.
Yeah.
Just have them all be basically mutants of some sort. Yeah.
And Dorian Gray. Oh, whatever happens.
Yeah, it's another story that a lot of people seem to have talked about, but every time there's like an adaptation of that, it seems like it either doesn't get sold or it gets independently distributed. I mean, there's even a bunch of other ones I've been trying to track down that have an interesting take on that subject matter. It just seems like kind of like all these books that are just, no longer read in even schools anymore, is like there are some of these movies which took a while to even be in the complete Universal collection, and some are still not in the collection, but I mean, Shout Factory's put out a bunch of them. I think a lot of this folklore, people can turn to the internet and even do an essay on it still, summing up the evolution of these, various characters and portrayals. Yeah, this has been a delight, guys. It really is. Just venturing back in time, just seeing that it's more than just, a sitcom reference or a mere just parody that everyone knows it for. Everyone does kind of get a lot of themes from these creatures, and everyone has their favorite one. I still see people cosplay them, or, you know, and not so much at Halloween. I still have kind of unimaginative people trying to be the billionth, you know, Jedi Knight or Ghostface from Scream. But every once in a while, I will see someone who does do a pretty cool creature feature, and it's more than just Gamera or Godzilla. It's more like, they'll try and do a mummy. They'll try and do a definitely a Frankenstein and Wolfman.
I saw one do a great go see Dracula one time. They had the cape and everything. In fact, I think they got the cape. They got the actual the necklace that he wears, like that thing. You know, and he was at a comic book convention, and he came in and he was like, everybody was going, ooh.
This comic is going back on the shelf. I got to talk to this guy.
I just wanted to say, come here. Come. You're very strong, Van Helsing. Stronger than you think, Count. What is it now? Wolfsbane? More powerful than Wolfsbane, Count. Whips out the cross and goes, like that, you know.
Oh, God. That's freaky.
Oh, you're his man, Van Helsing.
One of these days, I'll probably get some free time and finally finish my Wishmaster outfit. If Amanda wants to hear this, I got my... I got a Nosferatu mask, and then I got some Beneficent horns and tipped them upside down.
Yes.
And so then I could get that. And so then the matter was, I took a Jedi robe. I should probably just painted it different. The hard part was just figuring out what kind of armor and Hellboy type, you know, gloves to kind of put on. I had some like red serpent type of claws that could be used as either a vampire or a demon, but I just kind of stopped doing it. I got so distracted with work a year before even COVID hit. And then I just put it to the side. I'm like, I'll just kind of do this for fun, but I kind of want to complete it somewhere along the way.
It's there. It's waiting when the time is right.
And I was infuriated because I went to a convention and no one knew who the fuck I was. And I kept making jokes. I even had a red ruby in my shoulders. I'm like Pinhead, but I play tricks. No one knew who the fuck I was. That's the worst
when you have the best idea and like nobody's there with you.
The best part was there was a guy trying to sell a bunch of college students at that convention some insurance, and I just kept fucking around with him.
Nice.
Are you trying to sell me something? I'll grant you a wish.
I love it. Well, I just want to say, we can keep chatting, but I just want to say thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. This was very cool.
Busted into the party, and it was a lot of fun.
My condolences. I heard you've had an incident in your family.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
This is the worst time for that. And I told Darren I had a COVID scare about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's awful. It was scary, but I'm just it was a lot of fun to be here and talk about Universal monster movies.
And he does a hell of a job with Psychosomatic. He picks the most uncanny movies, some which are hit so deep you can just kind of tell that the corporate powers that funded it really secretly don't want it out there anymore. And it's so close to home. It's even funnier.
He definitely can politicize anything and is on hand to radicalize anyone who's ready to get political and get progressive. So definitely. It's even
trickier because he'll take on some other movies where it's like, what was going with this ending? Or did the movie take a different form, even though the filmmaker was even more radical than the characters portrayed?
Right.
Even just seeing him get into some other guys who are even crazier, like John Milius, is even more intriguing. Like, oh, what side of the equator does he fall in? Or does he just like to talk shit?
Right? Love it.
Oh, man. So, love you, JJ. Love you, Tom. Love you, Paul.
Love you.
Welcome back anytime, Amanda.
Thank you so much.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram
The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up